It was a warm and rather tranquil afternoon in early June, when the dull hum of London drifted lazily through the open windows of our familiar rooms at 221B Baker Street. Holmes sat in his armchair, thin knees drawn up, pipe between his lips, and eyes half closed, as though the great detective were in some deep communion with invisible forces of logic. For myself, I had a medical journal open upon my lap, though I confess my eyes strayed more than once toward the man who was my constant wonder and companion. I had learned to read the moods of Sherlock Holmes as one might the weather over the Thames. When his lids drooped thus, and the smoke wreathed slowly about his head, I knew he was neither asleep nor idle, but simply resting that extraordinary mind before its next storm of deduction.
Dryly, your gaze is becoming rather fixed, Watson. You look as though you would diagnose me with some obscure malady of the mind.
Startled. Upon my word, Holmes, I was merely wondering what problem occupies your thoughts. You have been sitting in that chair for the better part of an hour without a single word.
Smiling faintly. My dear fellow, I was contemplating the singular monotony of life when deprived of crime. London seems to have grown distressingly virtuous of late. No murders, no jewel thefts, no international conspiracies. Positively depressing.
Laughing. I dare say most of London would be content with such tranquility, though it may offend your sense of adventure.
Tranquility, my dear Watson, is the death of the analytical mind. One must have data to work upon, or the faculties rust. A mind such as mine rebels against stagnation.
I could only shake my head. The man before me, lean and hawk-faced, seemed born to pursue mystery. At the faintest scent of a puzzle was enough to awaken in him all the restless fire of genius.
Leaning forward suddenly, ah, but perhaps we shall be spared this dreary beast after all. Footsteps upon the stair, heavy, deliberate, and the ring of a stick against the banister. You hear it? Hmm.
Indeed, Holmes, you have ears sharper than mine. I should say it was Mrs. Azit Hudson, bringing up the afternoon post.
Smirking. Mrs. Hudson Watson does not wear boots with rubber heels, nor carry an umbrella with an ivory tip. Our visitor is a man of middle age, likely of independent means. The gait denotes comfort rather than toil. He pauses upon the landing, uncertain. Ah, now! The knock. Come in!
Three firm raps echoed through the room.
Offstage, nervous. Beg pardon, gentlemen. Is this Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
Indeed it is. Pray step in, sir, and favor us with your name and business.
Where's gone of his Arisat? The door opened to admit a tall, thin man with an angular face. His clothes of decent though well-worn fabric, he clutched a hat in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. His demeanor was one of polite confusion, as though he hardly knew whether to be pleased or embarrassed by his errand.
My name is Garrideb, Nathan Garrideb. I have come upon a matter which, I dare say, will sound a trifle strange. Yet I was told that if any man in London could make sense of it, it would be you, Mr. Holmes.
Pleasantly. Strange matters are the breath of my life, Mr. Garrideb. Pray take a seat and tell us your story from the beginning. Watson here is my friend and associate. You may speak freely before him.
Settling nervously, it began, sir, with this advertisement in the Morning Chronicle. You will see it states, to Mr. Nathan Garrideb, or any gentleman bearing that surname, communication of great importance. Apply to 136 Little Rider Street. You may imagine my surprise, gentlemen, for Garrideb is a most uncommon name.
Aside, narrating indeed the name struck me as peculiar. I could not recall ever meeting another of it.
Examining paper. And you answered this advertisement.
I did, Mr. Holmes, and found there an American gentleman, a Mr. John Garrideb of Kansas, he called himself. He claimed that a wealthy landowner in the States, a certain Alexander Garrideb, had died without heirs, save that he wished his estate divided among 3 men of his name. Mr. John Garrideb had already been found, and he sought the other 2. If I would join him, he said, we should each receive a third share, some $5 million apiece.
Astonished, 5 million. Upon my word, that's an extraordinary sum.
Coolly, And what was required of you, Mr. Garrideb, in order to claim this generous inheritance?
Uneasy, merely to help locate the third Garrideb, sir. Mr. John seemed quite anxious to find the fellow. He even offered me a small advance for my trouble.
Ha 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 ha. And you naturally began to suspect there was more to it than appeared?
Well, yes, sir. The whole business seemed almost too good to be true. When I mentioned that I was a collector of rare coins and curios, Mr. John Garrideb grew exceedingly interested and insisted on calling upon me at my lodgings in Kensington. He has been twice since then, always pressing me about the inheritance, yet never producing any real proof.
Holmes exchanged a brief glance with me, one of those quick flashes of understanding which needed N.K. or words between us.
Thoughtful. The story has the unmistakable odor of charlatanry. Tell me, Mr. Garrideb, what sort of man is this American?
A loud fellow, sir, hearty in manner, perhaps too hearty. He speaks of his time in the West, of land and cattle, and of fortunes made overnight, but there is something forced about his cheerfulness. I cannot quite place it.
Tryly. And this Alexander Garrideb, have you any evidence that he ever existed?
None, Mr. Holmes. None beyond Mr. John's tale.
Leaning back, I see. Then the mystery begins to take shape. A man invents a dead millionaire and uses the promise of fabulous wealth to lure others of the same name into some scheme. The question is, what scheme?
Holmes rose and began pacing the room, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin, his grey eyes glinting with interest. I knew that the game, as he loved to call it, was afoot once more.
Watson, my hat. Mr. Garrideb, you shall accompany us to your lodgings. I should very much like to make the acquaintance of your American namesake.
Relieved. You will come today, sir? That would ease my mind immensely.
At once. If the fellow is honest, he will welcome scrutiny. If he is not, we may learn something from the manner of his discomposure. Come, Watson.
Narrating within half an hour, we found ourselves rattling through the London streets in a hansom cab, the clatter of hooves echoing against the stones. Holmes sat silent beside me, his sharp features set in that expression of cold abstraction, which always told me his mind was busy weaving the threads of some intricate design.
Quietly. Tell me, Watson, what strikes you as peculiar in this case?
Thoughtful. Well, Holmes, there is the odd coincidence of three men sharing such an uncommon name, and the fact that the supposed benefactor is dead, leaving no direct proof. It sounds to me like a confidence trick, though I cannot see its purpose.
Approving. Excellent, Watson. You reason nearly as well as a consulting detective. The essence of such schemes lies always in what the villain desires from his victim. Money, naturally. But in what form? In what form? Does he wish to obtain a signature to enter the man's home, or perhaps to distract him from something under his very nose? Observe everything, for in trivialities lie the clues.
Narrating, we arrived presently at Kensington, where Mr. Wigler, Nathan Garrideb kept rooms filled with an extraordinary clutter of curios. Coins, weapons, bits of armor, fossils, and framed engravings crowded every inch of space. It was clear the man was more of a collector than a housekeeper, knighting charming IN7 buyer.
Apologetically, I fear, gentlemen, my treasures have outgrown my walls. But you will find me honest, though untidy.
Smiling slightly, disorder is a sign of active mind, Mr. Garrideb. Pray, sit while we await your American acquaintance.
A bell rings from below.
Even as Holmes spoke, there came the sound of a doorbell, followed by heavy footsteps upon the stairs. A moment later, a large, florid man with a bristling mustache and broad hat entered unannounced.
Boisterous. Well, I'll be darned, Mr. Where's his Nathan the Garrideb, sir, and, if I'm not mistaken, the famous Sherlock Holmes himself. Glad to make your acquaintance, sir. Mighty glad.
With polite reserve. The pleasure is mine, Mr. John Garrideb. You come, I believe, from Kansas?
That's right, sir. The good old US of A, where a man's fortune is as big as his courage. And now, by thunder, Here we all are, 2 Garridebs down, one to find.
Narrating, his manner was loud and jovial, yet beneath it I detected a certain tension, as though the man played a part that did not fit him naturally. Holmes watched him closely, his expression unreadable.
Mildly. You must allow me to congratulate you on your luck, Mr. John Garrideb. Few men have such promising prospects thrust upon them.
Luck, sir? No luck about it. Just the hand of Providence bringing us Garridebs together. Now, if we can find the third, a fellow named Howard, last known somewhere about Birmingham, we'll all be rich men.
And you have proof for this inheritance.
Evasively proof? Why, certainly, though I haven't the papers on me. All in due time, Mr. Holmes. All in due time. What matters now is getting our trio complete. Mr. Video complete. Nathan here is to help, and perhaps you, sir, might lend a hand. You've got the brains for sniffing out men.
Coldly polite. I shall consider the matter. Tell me, have you already visited Mr. Nathan's collection before today?
Once or twice, sure thing. Wonderful stuff he's got. Coins, relics, bits of the old world. Makes a man feel he's back in history.
Holmes's eyes glinted at that. I could almost see the thought forming in his mind.
Softly indeed. And did you, by chance, admire the cabinets near the south wall, those beside the window?
Hesitant. Why? Yes, I suppose I did. Fine cases those.
Smiling thinly. Curious, very curious.
Narrating. With that, Holmes made some trivial remark and turned the conversation to America, yet I knew that the real investigation had already begun, and that behind his quiet eyes, the detective had seen something of great significance. Thus ended that first strange meeting with the Garridebs, two men linked by name, and perhaps by something darker beneath it. Little did I know that this innocent-seeming affair would soon lead to gunfire, revelation, and one of the most curious cases of our long career together. It was late that same evening when Holmes and I returned once more to our rooms at 221B Baker Street. The lamps were lit, the curtains drawn against the London fog, and Mrs. Balliol Hudson had thoughtfully left a supper tray upon the side table. Holmes, however, had little appetite for food when his mind was aflame with mystery. He threw himself into his chair, fingers steepled, eyes half closed, and a thin trail of smoke rising from his pipe like the incense of contemplation. I had seen that expression before. The inward gaze of a man whose thoughts were racing far ahead of. The hour. I poured out 2 cups of tea and ventured a remark. Holmes, what think you of our new acquaintances, the Garridebs? The tale grows stranger with every word.
Quietly. Stranger, perhaps, but not more mysterious, my dear Watson. The pattern begins to form quite clearly if one looks at it from the proper angle.
You astonish me. To me, it seems full of contradictions. A dead millionaire in America, a search for namesakes, and a promise of fabulous wealth.
With a slight smile. Exactly. And in those contradictions lies the key. Consider an American stranger, loud of voice, glib of tongue, and keen to make his way into the lodgings of a quiet collector. He brings with him a story so improbable that any rational man should laugh it out of doors, and yet he counts on the bait of riches to suspend disbelief.
You suspect him of fraud, then?
Fraud, and perhaps something darker. Did you note his interest in the arrangement of the furniture in Garrideb's rooms? He was not studying curios, Watson. He was measuring space.
Measuring space?
Indeed. His eyes wandered not to the cabinet's contents, but to the wall behind them, and more than once he tapped his heel upon the floorboards. That, my friend, is the behavior of a man mapping his surroundings.
Astonished. Good heavens. You believe he has some hidden purpose connected with the very room itself?
Grimly, I do. And our next step is to discover what lies beneath that purpose. The name Garrideb is but a mask, a convenient excuse to approach his victim. Tell me, Watson, what was your impression of Nathan Garrideb himself?
A harmless, bookish soul, a man more at home among his relics than among men. He seemed guileless enough.
Precisely the sort of man a scoundrel would choose to deceive. You see, The villain's success depends upon finding a subject of weak character, one easily flattered, easily bewildered. The promise of millions blinds him to danger.
And yet, what object could the American hope to gain by this charade?
Leaning forward, his eyes gleaming, "That, Watson, is the question. When you can tell me why he wished access to that specific room, we shall have solved the riddle entire."
Holmes rose then, restless as a hound that scents game in the wind. He paced the floor, stopping now and then to glance toward the window where the fog pressed like a pale ghost against the glass.
Low voice. "I shall require the Gazetteer of London, Watson. There is something about Little Rider Street that nags at me."
I fetched the worn volume from the shelf and watched as he turned its pages rapidly.
Reading softly, "Little Rider Street, off Westminster Road, once the site of old ironworks. Later converted into warehouses. Yes. One property, 136, formerly owned by a firm of printing engineers, closed after a police raid concerning forged documents." "Ha! Forgery, Watson! Do you see the connection?"
Forgery, and an American of dubious manners calling himself Garrideb. You think he may have been involved?
The odds incline heavily toward it. Our visitor may not be John Garrideb of Kansas at all, but someone with a very different history. We shall see what the police records have to say. Lestrade will know the name, if it is worth knowing.
And narrating. The next morning, we called upon Inspector Lestrade at Scotland Yard. The little detective, sharp-eyed and brisk as ever, greeted us with his customary mixture of irritation and admiration.
Gruffly, "Morning, Mr. Holmes. Doctor, and what queer bird have you got in your net this time?"
A bird from across the Atlantic, Lestrade, and one that may have nested here before. I am seeking information on a man known to us as John Garrideb. An American, large, red-faced, with a heavy moustache. I suspect the name to be false.
Hev, frowning. That rings a bell. Wait here. Rustles through papers. Yes, here we are. James Winter, alias Killer Evans, a Chicago forger and gunman. Did 7 years at Joliet, escape, and was last seen in London 2 years ago. Dangerous customer. Holmes carries a revolver and isn't afraid to use it.
Startled. Good heavens, the same man.
Grimly satisfied. Exactly as I thought. The name Garrideb is merely another alias. Thank you, Lestrade. You have confirmed my suspicions admirably.
I don't like the sound of it, Holmes. If this Killer Evans is at large, he'll be up to no good.
Nor do I doubt it. But with luck, we shall lay him by the heels before harm comes to anyone.
Narrating, we returned to Baker Street in silence. Holmes's expression was one of core determination. He had that look which meant the chase was nearing its climax.
Abruptly, "Watson, we must act swiftly." Evans's interest in Garrideb's rooms can only mean there is something hidden there, something worth the risk of discovery. I propose we visit our collector again this afternoon, but not alone. You will bring your revolver.
Firmly you may rely upon me, Holmes. It was near 3 o'clock when we again reached Kensington, the sky heavy with clouds. Nathan Garrideb welcomed us with timid pleasure, unaware that his very life might hang upon our errand.
Cheerful. Mr. Holmes, I hardly hope to see you again so soon. You have news, perhaps?
We have, Mr. Garrideb, though not the sort you expect. Tell me, have you heard again from your American friend?
Indeed, he called, but an hour ago. He was most excited, said he had traced the third Garrideb to Birmingham, and wished me to come there with him tomorrow to complete the arrangements. I am to meet him at 9 in the morning at the railway station.
With deceptive calm. Did he say anything of your rooms, whether he intended to return here?
Only that he wished to examine one of my cabinets again, a piece of armor he fancied. He is to call this evening.
Quietly, I see. Then we shall have the pleasure of meeting him here. But you, Mr. Garrideb, must do exactly as I say.
Certainly, Mr. Holmes. I am at your service.
When he arrives, speak with him, naturally. Lead him to believe you are ready for the journey tomorrow. Watson and I will remain out of sight in the next room. If I give the signal, you will step back at once. Is that clear?
Perfectly clear, sir. Though I confess you alarm me.
There is nothing to fear, provided you obey. Now, Watson, to your station.
Narrating. We concealed ourselves behind the curtain of an adjoining chamber that overlooked the sea, sitting room through a narrow crack in the door. The minutes passed slowly. Then came the sound of heavy footsteps on the stair.
A phone ring at the bell.
Boisterous. Evening, Mr. Nathan. Hope I ain't disturbing you. Thought I'd just drop by and look over that fine piece of armor again before we set off in the morning.
Pleasantly. By all means, Mr. Garrideb. Here it stands, a 15th century breastplate, rather a curiosity.
I watched through the crack as the American moved about the room, his jovial manner masking a calculating glance. He paused near the cabinet Holmes had indicated, and for a moment his hand slipped behind it, pressing against the wall.
Suddenly, from doorway, hands up, Evans.
The change was instantaneous. Oh! The American spun round, a snarl on his lips, a revolver flashing from his pocket. But Holmes was quicker. There came the blinding crack of a shot, splintering glass, and then I fired in turn.
Two sharp explosions echo through the room.
Urgent. Are you hurt, Holmes?
Coolly, a mere graze, my dear Watson. Our friend's bullet has spoiled my coat, but not my health. Secure his weapon, if you please.
Gasping, "You devil, you had this laid for me."
Say, quite so. Who? Killer Evans. Your little play acting as an American investor has reached its final curtain. The name Garrideb will trouble no one further.
The man stood panting, his face ashen. Under Holmes's direction, I bound his wrists while Holmes stooped to examine the wall behind the cabinet. A single panel had been loosened, revealing a hollow recess within the masonry.
With grim satisfaction, as I suspected. Observe, Watson, the remnants of a printing press, molds for false banknotes. Our friend here has returned to an old workshop once used by his confederates. He hoped to recover the hidden tools of his trade.
Jose, curse you, Holmes. I'd have had them out tonight if not for you meddling fools.
Lightly. Your gratitude is overwhelming. Watson, fetch the constable from the corner. I believe Inspector Lestrade will be delighted with our prize.
Narrating, within the hour, Lestrade arrived, beaming with satisfaction at the capture. Killer Evans was led away, cursing and muttering threats, while poor Nathan Garrideb stood trembling by the window, the enormity of his narrow escape dawning upon him.
Shaken. To think, Mr. Holmes, that I was within inches of such a scoundrel. I shall never trust a stranger again.
Kindly. The lesson has been dearly bought, Mr. Garrideb, but perhaps not in vain. You are fortunate indeed that curiosity led you first to Baker Street.
Later, as we rode homeward through the mist, Holmes was uncharacteristically silent. Only when we neared Baker Street did he speak.
Softly. A strange case, Watson, and a narrow one. The lure of a name, the shadow of greed, and beneath it all the frailty of human credulity. How easy to mislead, how swift to trust.
Gently, you saved his life, Holmes.
Quietly, perhaps, yet I confess, the bullet that tore my sleeve was a trifle too near for comfort. Come, my dear fellow, let us be thankful that, for tonight at least, justice has the upper hand.
And with that, he smiled, the brief, rare smile that seemed to lift the years from his face. Thus ended another adventure in that long chronicle of our friendship, where danger and deduction walked hand in hand beneath the London fog. So, the following morning dawned grey and still, the kind of London morning when even the light seems weary from filtering through the fog. I found Holmes seated at our breakfast table, a litter of papers spread before him, his dressing gown loose about his shoulders, and a gleam of cold satisfaction in his eyes. The events of the previous night still lingered vividly in my mind, the gunfire, the arrest, and the sight of Holmes standing calm amid the chaos. Yet to him, danger had already become a thing past. The hunt was over, and now came the dissection of its logic. I confess, Holmes, that my nerves are not what they were. You took that bullet as calmly as though it were no more than a mosquito bite.
My dear Watson, a man who allows his pulse to quicken in moments of peril has no business in my profession. The capacity for calm is the first necessity of deduction. Had I flinched, our friend Evans might have succeeded in removing a far more valuable object than the lining of my coat.
You speak of the hidden recess behind the cabinet?
Precisely. That small cavity represented the end of Evans's entire scheme. Consider his position. Years ago, he was part of a counterfeiting ring operating out of Little Rider Street. Their work was exposed, the premises raided, yet one of their workshops, that very room later rented by Nathan Garrideb, remained untouched. Within it lay the apparatus for forging American banknotes. When Evans escaped from prison and reached London again, he learned by chance that the room had been let to a harmless collector. Imagine his frustration to know his treasure lay within those walls, yet he could not approach without arousing suspicion.
Hence his ingenious invention of the inheritance tale.
Just so. He needed a plausible reason to visit, to study the room, to gain access whenever convenient. The name Garrideb, being so unusual, provided a perfect pretext. It transformed coincidence into opportunity. He could not foresee, however, that one of the supposed heirs would come to me for advice.
I recall how swiftly you grasped his motive. Yet what first aroused your suspicion?
Combination of trifles, as always. When I observe, I do not look merely at a man's words, but at their dissonance with his bearing. Our American's speech was fluent, yet his glamour slipped once or twice into the pattern of an educated Englishman trying to disguise himself. His fingernails bore the black stains of printer's ink, not the kind one gathers from reading a newspaper, but the deep stains of mechanical work. And there was that curious insistence upon examining the wall by the cabinet. To the trained eye, each of these alone may be minor. Together they shout the truth.
It still amazes me, Holmes, how swiftly you assemble such fragments into certainty.
It is not swiftness, Watson, but patience. The patience of observing without preconception. The world is full of data. Most men see only the pattern they expect. My task is to see the pattern that exists.
And poor Nathan Garrideb, I fear the shock of last night will weigh upon him for some time.
A sadder case of misplaced trust I have seldom seen. I thelg, yet he is harmless, and perhaps the experience will teach him prudence. It is one of the unkindly truths of our profession that we deal always with the folly of the innocent and the cunning of the wicked. Without one, the other could not thrive.
Holmes leaned back, the morning paper rustling in his hand. He read for a moment in silence, then laid it down.
The newspapers, as usual, contrive to make poetry out of dullness. Listen to this brilliant capture by Mr. Sherlock Holmes, noted American criminal secured in Kensington. They forget, naturally, to mention that it was your bullet which disarmed him, not mine.
I was fortunate to hit it all. The smoke and confusion left me nearly blind.
Nonsense, Watson. You fired coolly and with precision. You have the makings of a very creditable partner in crime prevention. Were I to retire, perhaps you might hang out your own shingle. Dr. John H. Watson, consulting detective.
I should make a sorry figure beside you, Holmes. My method would be nothing but imitation.
There are worse things to imitate than reason, my dear fellow. Yo! And besides, every imitation carries within it the seed of improvement. You observe far more keenly now than when first I had the pleasure of your acquaintance.
I thanked him, though I knew his words, kindly as they sounded, carried the faintest touch of irony. For Holmes, observation was as natural as breathing. For me, it was labor, often clumsy, sometimes misguided, yet always sincere.
Tell me, Watson, what lesson do you draw from the affair?
That greed is the oldest mask of deception, and that chance names and coincidences can lead men into peril. Also, perhaps, that one should not underestimate the value of a quick trigger.
Admirably put. Yet There is a deeper principle. Every human scheme, however elaborate, betrays itself through its very complexity. Evans erred because his imagination outran his prudence. A simpler plan might have succeeded. It is a curious fact that the more cunning a man believes himself to be, the easier he becomes to read.
You regard crime, then, as an intellectual weakness?
Invariably. The perfect crime, Watson, is impossible because the criminal mind must act in accordance with motive, and motive leaves a trace as surely as footsteps in snow. The art of detection is but the science of reading those traces.
And yet, you take no joy in punishment.
Punishment is the province of the law. My interest ends with proof. Once the truth stands revealed, I lose all curiosity about the scaffold or the cell. I confess, however, that this particular rascal's downfall gives me a certain satisfaction. His bullet might have been the last argument of a desperate man.
I still marvel that you anticipated his violence.
It was written in his eyes, Watson. The desperate man carries his decision in his pupils before his hand moves. When I stepped forward, I knew he would draw. That knowledge allowed me to be faster. You see, anticipation is the essence of survival.
Then deduction is more than a mental exercise, it is a shield.
Precisely so. To reason correctly is to foresee, and to foresee is to be prepared. That is why I say everything is elementary when one sees clearly.
He spoke those words with such quiet certainty that I felt again that mixture of admiration and bewilderment, as dormant which his genius never failed to stir in me. The sunlight was breaking faintly through the fog now, throwing a thin bar of gold across the table. Holmes looked at it thoughtfully.
There is one point, however, that troubles me still.
Indeed, what could remain unclear?
Why Evans returned to London at all? The man had escaped American justice and might have found safety in the colonies or on the continent. Yet he chose to revisit the very ground of his crime, and for what? A set of tools, long disused, of little value. It was the gambler's instinct, Watson, the same compulsion that drives a thief to the scene of his theft. Habit overcomes reason. He could not resist the temptation to reclaim what was once his.
And that weakness brought him to ruin.
As weakness always does. You will note, however, how human nature remains the same beneath every disguise. Whether in the alleys of Whitechapel or the prairies of Kansas, the same passions govern men. That, my friend, is the constant element upon which deduction depends.
You speak as though you were less a detective than a philosopher.
And the two are not far apart. To trace a chain of reasoning from cause to effect is philosophy in action. Only my field of experiment happens to involve human folly rather than abstract theory.
He smiled then, that rare, fleeting smile which lightened his ascetic face and reminded me that beneath all the cold brilliance, there beat a heart not altogether untouched by human feeling.
Watson, enough of reflection, enough of reflection. The day awaits, and somewhere in this city another puzzle is brewing. Let us hope it arrives before ennui consumes us both.
You mean you already tire of victory?
My dear fellow, victory is merely the conclusion of interest. Once the problem is solved, it ceases to exist. Life, to me, is tolerable only when it presents perpetual enigmas.
For me, Holmes, life is tolerable only when I have the privilege of witnessing you untangle them. Wahitan, whatever the years may bring, I shall never weary of your company or your methods.
Then we are well matched. Watson, the man who seeks riddles and the man who delights in their telling. Between us, I dare say, London will never lack for chronicles.
And so the conversation drifted into lighter themes. Outside, the city stirred to its endless rhythm. The clip of hooves, the cry of vendors, the hum of distant wheels. Within those walls, I sat watching the man whose mind could turn shadows into substance, chance into certainty. And I thought again how narrow the thread is between life and death, between folly and wisdom, between crime and its discovery. For in that narrow thread of logic lies all that makes Sherlock Holmes the master of deduction and myself, his ever grateful chronicler. Several days passed before the tumult of the Garrideb affair began to subside. The newspapers, ever eager for sensation, had wrung the story dry until even the most casual Londoner could quote the name of the American criminal and recount how Sherlock Holmes had exposed him by means of scientific deduction. Holmes, of course, read such reports with quiet disdain. She took neither pride nor pleasure in public applause, and by the end of the week, the entire episode had already faded for him into the file of completed cases. For my own part, however, if this, the hours is such potations which a dumber legged about going to leg dumber, I could not so easily dismiss the image of poor Nathan Garrideb, that lonely figure amid his dusty relics. It troubled me that the man had suffered both the deception of a scoundrel and the terror of sudden violence. And so, one morning, I suggested to Holmes that we might pay our unfortunate client another visit.
Mightly. An excellent thought, Watson. Compassion, you see, is the one deduction that seldom misleads. I confess I have been curious to observe how our friend fares when stripped of his dreams of millions.
We found Mr. Garrideb in his rooms at Kensington, surrounded as ever by his eccentric treasures. Yet the man himself seemed altered, older somehow, and infinitely wearier. He greeted us with a nervous laugh that ended in a sigh.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, you find me much as you left me, though the excitement of that evening nearly finished me. I have slept little since. Every time the floorboards creak, I half expect that dreadful man to return.
Fear is an obstinate tenant, Mr. Garrideb, but you must not let it lodge rent-free in your mind. Evans will trouble no one again for a long while. Scotland Yard has seen to that.
Yes, so I read in the papers. It's you I read in the papers. But I cannot forget that I welcomed him into my home, that I was such a fool as to believe in that monstrous tale of inheritance. You must think me a simpleton, Mr. Holmes.
On the contrary, sir, you are guilty only of possessing an imagination and a trusting heart. Howd, both admirable qualities, though dangerous when left unguided by reason. Believe me, even the wisest man can be deceived when hope blinds the eye.
Hope, yes. I suppose it was that. $5 million. For a moment I believed my dull, solitary life might suddenly blaze into importance. I thought of endowments for museums, of catalogues and collections bearing my name. Foolish vanity, perhaps, but it gave me joy.
I spoke gently, for there was something pitiful in his confession. Not greed, but loneliness had made him a victim. You have nothing to reproach yourself for, Mr. Garrideb. Deception often preys upon the best qualities of a man, not the worst.
Watson is quite right. The world is full of rogues who live by manipulating sincerity. The only defense is knowledge, and perhaps a touch of suspicion.
You both speak kindly, yet I cannot help feeling diminished by the whole affair. My collections have lost their meaning to me. I wander among them like a ghost.
Then it is time you left them behind for a while. A man cannot live forever among relics of the past without turning into one himself. Take a holiday, Mr. Garrideb. Travel. See England. There are curiosities enough in nature to outshine the finest cabinets.
Smiling faintly, you may be right, Mr. Holmes, though I fear I am too set in my habits for such adventures.
Habits, my dear sir, are chains easily broken. Once the will awakes, you might begin by cataloguing your collection anew, not for value, but for memory. Knowledge, you see, is the one treasure no thief can steal.
We remained with him for an hour, speaking of art, travel, and science. Holmes, who could discourse on any subject from Roman coins to chemical alloys, drew the old man gradually out of his despondency. By the time we left, there was a glimmer of animation once more in Garrideb's eyes. As we descended the stairs, I turned to Holmes with admiration. You were remarkably gentle with him, Holmes. I had not thought you possessed such a gift for consolation.
Dryly, my dear Watson, sentiment is merely deduction applied to the heart. I observed that Mr. Garrideb's self-esteem had suffered more than his nerves. To restore it was therefore the logical remedy.
You make kindness sound like a chemical formula.
In essence, it is. Sympathy, properly administered, acts as a restorative. Too little, and the patient despairs. Too much, and he becomes dependent. Moderation is the physician's art, in medicine or in morals.
I laughed, but I could not help thinking that behind his irony lay a real tenderness. Holmes often concealed his truest feelings beneath the mask of reason. That evening, we sat by the fire at Baker Street. The events of the case had settled into calm retrospect, yet Holmes seemed unusually reflective, gazing into the flames as though they mirrored some private thought. You are uncommonly quiet tonight, Holmes. I should have thought the success of our investigation would please you.
Success, yes, but satisfaction, no. You see, Watson, there is something profoundly tragic in such cases. Evans, the forger, had intelligence enough to construct a clever plan, but he chose to employ it in deceit. Garrideb, the scholar, had intellect enough to perceive beauty, yet lacked the strength to question illusion. Between them lies the whole compass of human frailty.
You speak as though both were victims.
In a sense, they are. Crime is only the shadow cast by human desire when reason is absent. I do not excuse it, but I understand it. The criminal and the credulous are but two expressions of the same impulse to make life yield more than it promises.
That is a melancholy philosophy.
Truth is seldom cheerful, my dear Watson. Yet there is comfort in understanding, for understanding brings mastery. If we can trace the cause, we need not fear the effect.
Kansas. And what of you, Holmes? Do you never tire of reading the darker pages of the human soul?
Tired, yes, but not disheartened. There are moments, I confess, when the weight of folly and wickedness oppresses me. Yet then I remember that each case solved, each deceit unveiled, is a small victory for reason over chaos. That, Watson, is purpose enough.
I could not answer, Cooper. The firelight threw strange shadows across his face, accentuating the austere beauty of those features that had become so familiar to me. It struck me suddenly how lonely his life must be, forever seeking, forever analyzing, never yielding to the warmth of ordinary companionship. Do you never envy the simpler man, Holmes, the man who can rest content without perpetual analysis?
After a pause, at times perhaps, but such envy buzzes quickly. For to know is always better than to guess, however cold the knowledge. The simple man may be happy, but he lives in twilight. I prefer the clear light, however harsh.
Yet even the clearest light casts shadows.
Indeed, and therein lies the fascination. The shadow defines the form. Mystery gives meaning to discovery. Without ignorance, there could be no science. Without crime, no detection.
You make even morality sound like a mathematical equation.
And why not? Every human act, good or evil, follows a line of cause and consequence. That is the ultimate theorem, and perhaps the divine one.
Smiled, though his words stirred a strange unease in me. Holmes had always approached morality as he approached chemistry, a subject for observation, not emotion. And yet, beneath the precision of his tone, there was something that spoke of fatigue, even sadness. Good. Then you will not rest long from your labors?
Rest is overrated. I shall spend the morning in my laboratory. There is an interesting experiment involving phosphorus and light absorption that I have long neglected.
The world might crumble around you, Holmes, and you would still be chasing a chemical curiosity.
Possibly, but in the pursuit of small truths, one sometimes stumbles upon great ones.
He smiled faintly then, and I knew the conversation was at an end. Later, as I retired for the night, I found myself reflecting upon the strange friendship that bound us, the man of logic and the man of loyalty, walking together through the fog of London, each illuminating the other in his own way. Garrideb affair had ended, yet its echo lingered in my thoughts. It seemed to me a parable of the age we lived in, an age of invention and illusion, of faith and fraud, and at its heart stood Holmes, the supreme interpreter of that restless century, forever seeking order amid confusion. As I closed my journal, I wrote one final line before sleep overtook me.
Where others see coincidence, he sees design. Where others see folly, he perceives truth. And though he claims to serve reason alone, I believe that somewhere beneath the cold machinery of his mind there beats a heart not untouched by pity.
Some weeks passed before the Garrideb affair faded from the front pages of the London press. The story, though strange, was quickly replaced by newer scandals and fresher curiosities. Yet within the quiet wards of Baker Street, its memory lingered still. I noticed a certain gravity in Holmes's manner during that time, a pensiveness that no amount of tobacco smoke nor chemical experiment could entirely dispel. One fog-laden evening, as I sat beside the fire with my medical journal, Holmes spoke suddenly from his armchair, his voice low and measured.
Watson, have you ever reflected upon the curious symmetry of our profession?
Symmetry, Holmes? I am afraid I do not follow.
Consider, my dear fellow, every crime we unravel seems but a mirror to the virtues it offends. Greed mocks generosity, deceit mocks truth, and violence mocks peace. Each case, therefore, becomes a study in opposites, a negative image revealing, by contrast, the shape of what is good.
That is a profound notion. I had not thought of it so. To you, then, even wickedness serves a purpose?
Indirectly, yes. Without it, there would be no test of reason, no triumph of intellect over chaos. The criminal, in his way, is the unwilling tutor of the detective. He provides the problem by which we measure our understanding.
Then Evans, the forger, was but a tutor to your science?
Precisely. He was a specimen, a symptom of a disease. I have spent my life diagnosing. Each case is another slide beneath the microscope.
You speak as though crime were a contagion.
And so it is. It spreads where ignorance allows. Society, Watson, is an organism. Vice is its infection. Justice, the immune response. My task is merely to identify the germ.
A grim occupation, Holmes, and yet I cannot help but think you thrive upon it.
With a faint smile. I suppose I do. To the naturalist, decay is as fascinating as bloom. But there are times when even I tire of pathology.
You amaze me. I should have thought the chase itself would forever renew you.
There are chases, Watson, which lead not to discovery, but to reflection. The Garrideb affair, for example, stirred something of that nature in me.
In what sense?
It reminded me that behind every puzzle lies a human heart, fragile, yearning, easily misled. I have prided myself on detachment, yet when I saw you bleeding in that wretched room, I realized that logic alone is a poor armor.
Holmes,
Do not interrupt, my dear fellow. I am not given to sentiment, as you know. But had that bullet struck you fatally, I fear I should have found my art meaningless. Thereafter, a machine without its witness.
You give me more credit than I deserve.
On the contrary, I give you precisely your due. You have been more than companion, Watson. You have been conscience. It is your humanity that has kept my reason from turning to stone.
I was silent, for his words touched me deeply. To hear such confession from Holmes, who so seldom betrayed emotion, was to glimpse the rarest side of that remarkable nature, a warmth as fleeting as sunlight on frost. Holmes, I have often thought you the most complete man of science alive, yet I see now that even science must bend before friendship.
Friendship, yes, though I should define it as a mutual faith in each other's constancy. You see, Watson, deduction may explain the world, but loyalty gives it meaning.
That is as close to poetry as I've ever heard from you.
Smiling faintly. Then perhaps the infection is spreading from your side of the room.
We both laughed, and the tension of the moment dissolved. For a while, we sat in companionable silence, listening to the rain against the window panes and the distant roll of carriage wheels below. The city murmured like a vast living creature, weary yet unceasing. Sharp copy! At length, I ventured another question. Tell me, Holmes, do you ever think of retirement, of leaving this relentless pursuit behind?
After a pause, occasionally, there are days when I dream of a small farm somewhere in the Sussex Downs, bees, books, and the company of silence. Perhaps one day the world will no longer require my interference.
And yet, would you find peace there away from the thrill of inquiry?
Perhaps not at first, but there is a certain deduction even in the hum of bees. Their society mirrors ours, order, labor, discipline. I might find satisfaction in their quiet example.
Then you truly mean it. To withdraw when the time comes?
Every mind must one day rest, Watson. Even the keenest instrument dulls with use. But not yet. London still teems with enigmas. And I, alas, am still curious.
Curiosity, your most faithful companion.
Second only to you, my dear doctor.
I smiled at that, though a certain melancholy crept into my heart. I knew, as all men must know, that time would one day part us, that the days of Baker Street, with their smoke, their laughter, and their endless adventures, would not last forever. Yet at that moment, the fire burned bright, and Holmes's eyes gleamed with the old indomitable light. The clock ticked softly on the mantel. Outside, the lamplighters moved like ghosts through the mist.
Do you ever regret, Watson, that you abandoned medicine for this curious partnership?
Never. I have seen more of life and of human nature at your side than I could ever have learned from a lifetime of patience and prescriptions. You have taught me that observation is as vital to the soul as it is to science.
Then we have each profited from the experiment. You, a physician of the body, have studied the mind. I, a physician of the mind, have learned the value of the heart.
That is a fine exchange, Holmes.
Indeed. The balance of the equation at last, and last.
He rose then, pacing to the window, his silhouette etched against the dim glow of the street lamps. It followed his gaze downward, when the fog swirled around the gaslight like the breath of the city itself.
Look there, Watson, the endless riddle. Every light conceals a life, every shadow hides a secret. To see them clearly, to read their meaning, that is the work of a lifetime.
And yet you have done it, Holmes, more than any man alive.
I have tried, but deduction, like virtue, is never complete. Each truth discovered reveals another beyond it. That, I think, is the true adventure.
Then you will never cease to seek?
Not while there are mysteries in the world or in the human heart.
I wrote those words in my diary that night, for they seemed to me the perfect epitaph to Holmes's spirit, restless, reasoning, indestructible. Years have passed since then, yet whenever I walk the streets of London, I fancy I hear his quick, firm step upon the pavement or glimpse his tall figure vanishing into the fog. And though the world has changed, though telegraphs have given way to telephones and horse-drawn hansoms to roaring motors, still his presence seems near, guiding my thoughts whenever mystery crosses my path. For to me, Sherlock Holmes will ever remain not merely the master of deduction, but the measure of friendship, the embodiment of that rare union between reason and compassion, intellect and integrity. And so, dear listener, if one may call the world itself a listener, I close this chapter of our adventures with gratitude. Gratitude for the years shared in his company, for the lessons learned beside that immortal fire at Baker Street, and for the enduring truth that even in a world of crime and chaos, one brilliant mind and one loyal heart can still bring order to the darkness. Thus ends the adventure of the three Garridebs, and with it, perhaps, the finest illustration of the man I had the honor to call my friend, Sherlock Holmes.